Africa will be the talent pipeline for the world. And if your young people are not global in their thinking, then it becomes a problem.
But one of the things that was said was, please don't come thinking you're doing us a favor.
Exactly. I believe one of my first mandates here is to actually drive that awareness among universities within the region, letting them know that visibility is no longer negotiable in global higher education. We see a lot of universities so keen on signing MOUs. We need to look at getting into partnerships that you know would work for you.
Have a global perspective.
Exactly.
To say there's something I have that other institutions are looking for.
This is TINE Africa Podcast. The new sound of international education in Africa.
This episode is sponsored by Advent Ed Africa, providing educational advancement support for African institutions.
Welcome again to another episode of TINE Africa Podcast. This is where we talk about everything that has to do with international education in the continent of Africa. My name is Louis Adekola, and I'm your amazing host on this podcast. Today, on this podcast, we're going to be talking about something that is very, very, very important and relevant to the future of education and the future of international education in this continent and all over the world, to be honest. Because as a matter of fact, the concept of education is not one that is done in isolation. It is not one that is run, in silos. And that's why we've seen the emergence and the growth of partnerships, internationalization within the education and the higher education sector. And one of those conversations is the one around transnational education. This is popularly known as TINE. So for those who probably haven't heard of this is an opportunity for you to learn more about transnational education. Some people have said this is the future of international education in the continent. And I think today we will be talking a little bit more about transnational education, what this means for the future of international education. Today, I am joined by two amazing guests. And I know when I said amazing, I really meant it by every sense of that word. And you would know, when we get started with this conversation. To my immediate left is no other than Daniel Emenahor, who is the head of higher education at British Council, Nigeria. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Louis.
No other than Daniel.
I didn't know that was coming.
One and only.
But thanks, Louis. Good to be here.
Good to have you here as well.
Yeah.
All right. The second person on this episode is no other person. I said this again because he's an amazing person that I've met recently, and we've really, really learned a lot from one another. And you would also get to benefit from this as well. His name is Victor Okeugo, who is the Business Development Manager for Sub-Saharan Africa at TIME Higher Education. Hi, Victor.
Hi, Louis. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Very sharp and precise. Both of you are like, yeah, nice to be here. Very nice to have you here. Okay, let's start with a little icebreaker. And I know that you, Victor, used to work in a separate company. And again, we also would like to hear a bit about your work, because many of us know TIME Higher Education from the ranking systems, and we know that has emerged over the years. There was a time that African institutions weren't exactly being featured a lot, and now a lot of those things are changing. There are new things happening as well. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, a bit maybe of your background and what you currently do at THE.
Okay. Thank you, Louis. I think I got into the higher education space through my work with Elsevier a couple years ago. Elsevier is the Dutch publisher for higher education research. From Elsevier, I joined TIME Higher Education. And like you said, my responsibility covers West, Central, and East Africa. Now, before now, you know that at the global university rankings, Africa universities, like you mentioned, didn't really feature much. So I believe one of my first mandates here is to actually drive that awareness among universities within the region, letting them know that visibility is no longer negotiable in global higher education. and supporting them in ways to achieve that visibility. Because, of course, we're talking about partnerships here, and visibility is actually at the base of partnerships, global partnerships. Without being seen, right? It will be difficult to connect. So we try to help African higher education raise the bar in terms of visibility, and also see how they can also position properly in order to perform well at the rankings. But generally in THA, we say our work has to do with helping universities understand their current position in relation to their mission. So we work on bespoke projects as well with universities, helping them close that gap between where they are and where they should be, where they want to be, of course. So basically, a lot of things fit into that basket, but this is just a summary. So
it does sound like a lot of things fit into that, but I really appreciate the work that, is now being done in terms of, giving visibility and presence and support to African institutions, not only in terms of, them developing locally, but also building partnership, ensuring that they feature in global ranking and platforms as well. So thank you for the work. Thank you for your service. All right. So Daniel, you are a very popular face in this industry. I do think that you are. You've been, I think we got really close, like when you were still program manager or officer of higher education. So now the basic question is just a little bit about, some people don't know exactly the extent of your work in British Council. Some people don't exactly know what the British Council maybe does, or like the distinction between your work. They see the arts and the other things and IELTS and this and that. Tell us a bit more about yourself, maybe a little about your background and the work you do in British Council.
All right, thanks. My background is quite interesting. I started working in the social development space, doing programs that advance youth development, leadership, employability, and the likes. I once even managed the nationwide program to train young people in employability skills. So sometimes I introduce myself as a trainer or a facilitator, because I facilitate a lot of training sessions as well. And that work in terms of, building capacity of young people to access employment outcomes kind of pushed me to the education work as well. And from the lens of, if you look at our education, a lot of times when we talk about employability, we wait for young people to finish, to be done with university, to graduate from university, and start teaching them employability things like how to write a CV, how to communicate, personal development and all that stuff, how to be even job creators and not a job seeker. But those are things that you would expect them to know while they're in the university, while they're going through education. So coming to education was a mission in terms of how do we build the capacity of our institutions to provide value for young people that are employable when they graduate from school, and we're not waiting for them to graduate, and we are deploying employability programs for them. All right. So that, transitioned my journey into education to work with universities to build capacity, really. And my work in British Council as I lead our education programs. Many people know British Council as for IELTS exams, but we do beyond that. We do a lot of work in cultural engagement. We do a lot of work in education. We do a lot of work in building capacity of teachers in the rural areas to even teach English language. We do arts and culture, but in our education, really, we focus on building capacity of institutions, leveraging expertise from the UK through various programs, going global partnerships. We'll facilitate partnerships for internationalization, and one of the topics we'll also talk about today, TINE. Right, we do work in student mobility in terms of providing access to young people to access quality education, through our different channels and scholarships, in our working agents and counselors and even alumni. So it's quite a lot,
It is quite a lot. I envy you guys, but I don't envy you as well. I mean, I envy you because it's a very fancy work that you do. Let's start, because now this conversation is very, very important, because I've heard people say, the TNE is the future of education, of the future of higher education in Nigeria or in Africa or whatever. And I go into having further conversation with people and realize that to a very large extent, a lot of people don't exactly know the depth or even know the surface of what it is. But it's popular. It's a popular thing that we're talking about now. And I thought that this might be that avenue for us to shed more light, to have a conversation around it, especially from the lens of the African continent, context. So let's start with the very simple, but maybe the big one that sets the tone. What does TNE means? And I want to ask you this, Daniel, because of your work. What does TNE means in the real sense of it, and especially from the African perspective, where this is just a growing conversation?
Yeah. So TNE is Transnational Education, right? That's what it means.
Yeah.
And I feel many people already know what TNE means, but probably don't give it that name. All right. So TNE is when an institution provides education in another country, or simple example is a student takes a degree in Nigeria, but that degree is hosted by another country elsewhere, either the UK or whatever country it is. Right, that's simply TNE, and it's done through different models. The best example is distance learning. A lot of people take online degrees right now in Nigeria and even many parts of the world, so that that awarding institution can be, say, University of Portsmouth in the UK, or you're in Nigeria, you're taking that degree, you're interacting with the lecturers and whatnot. So that, in basic term, is transnational education. There are different models beyond distance and online learning, but that is what it is. And the reason why it's becoming, I will not say buzzword, but the reason why it's becoming one of the fundamental components of higher education is I will look at it as a way of sustaining access and quality education in the sector. But in the African context, I'm going to talk about that later, more about that later, but in the African context, it's really around how do we ensure that our young people, our students, are getting access to education. We all know what the data says in terms of the millions of people who finish or done with secondary school, but our university system does not have the capacity to absorb all of them.
Yeah.
So if there are models that allow you to take courses, allow you to take degrees from the comfort of your home or from a partnership, why not, right? So it's a way of sustaining that model and opening access to quality education. In the African context, however, TNE is now becoming more of the conversations around partnerships. And that's why I like one of your episodes around partnerships. Recently, how can universities partner together to internationalize their system, right? In terms of faculty, in terms of curriculum, in terms of structure, in terms of exchanges, in terms of research. So TNE is even just going beyond just transactional, but more partnerships, right? Coming together to advance educational outcomes for young people. Yeah.
Thank you very much for what you've said, and I really appreciate that you've not only just answered the question around what does TNE mean, but you've also given examples, and told us how that we're already used to. We see these things; it's already existing, right? But also beyond that, in terms of how it is relevant to us, our sector, or to the continent. Victor, I want to quickly just ask you to follow up on this part. How do you see, maybe currently, TNE improving access, not just by the institution coming to provide that opportunity, but in terms of driven partnership that already exists? I don't know if you get that question. Like, how do you see TNE already creating access or improving access through the partnerships that already exist?
Okay, so before I address the heart of that question, I think it's probably a bit enlightening to take a couple steps back to build a bit of context around TNE as we know it today.
Yeah.
So TNE has been in existence for decades. Before now in Africa. Just the formats have evolved over time, supported by technology. And of course, expanded partnerships, right? The old versions of TNE as we knew it before it even assumed the TNE name, things, if we could go back to when we had University College in Nigeria before independence.
Yeah.
Right, where students get to study in, I think, Ibadan, and then gets UK degrees.
The London,
Right. So those were the earlier predecessors of current TNE today, right? And of course, they started with some kinds of partnerships, right? Like I said, as technology has evolved, the scope of TNE has expanded, and the more popular versions we see today, of course, are the online degrees, like the online study, like Daniel mentioned. However, when it comes to partnerships, right, part of the formats of of TNE.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
I get you. Because we're in this episode, and in my head, I'm somehow thinking, Louis, you need to be clear. Is it THE? Is it TNE? Is it TINE? Because TINE itself is close to all of this as well.
Exactly. So pardon me, right? I'm a THA person, so I often mix the two. But anyways, when it comes to partnerships, right, with TNE today, right, one of the formats we see are the dual degree systems, right, where the students sometimes, on some occasions, right, they start studying in a particular country, right, and they probably finish up in another country and get both degrees, right? Or however they agree. There are other systems like the franchising model, right? Where a university from abroad or from another country could franchise some of their courses where people study in a different country, right? And are able to get the degrees of the other university. So there are various models that these partnerships can work, right? So basically, we see more universities as internationalization becomes a thing, I say, right? More universities are seeing the opportunity to expand beyond their local shores. And, we say it always that the world is a global village, right? And when I speak to universities in this context, I tell them, gone are the days when your competition is the university in your state, in your country. You are competing for students with universities in London, universities in America, universities in Australia. Your competition is no longer the next university beside you, right? You are simply in a global business now.
How do you think that the whole discussion around TNE can be equitable, and we're already jumping into it now, equitable, but also beneficial to the students, to the local partners, or to the institutions that they partner with, but to the countries in which this other side of TNE is operating. How do we ensure that it is, on a larger scheme of things, beneficial? I would like the two of you to respond to this.
I mean, I'll just take one point and I'll show Victor the justice. But I think one of the things, let's look at brain drain. Right? One of the issues with brain drain is that young people leave their country, go take a degree outside the country, and do not come back, right? And that's where the word jackpot and all the jackpot and all that conversation started from. But with TNE, you have an opportunity where you don't necessarily need to leave your home country. You take the degree there, whether it's branch campus, whether it's joint degree, whether it's online learning. But we are certain that your knowledge and the experience you've gained from that learning will be beneficial to your immediate community and the company that you're working. So in the long run, there's that benefit there for not even the institution, but in country in itself, right? Then if we start talking about cost, the TNE, we already know the numbers. You already know the numbers, the number of people who go outside the country to study year in, year out. Yes, some of them may be for migration reasons, but a huge number of them is also for career progression, it's also for quality education and the like. So there's that demand. I was talking about, we had a conversation online recently around the demand for education. And now we see a lot of foreign institutions coming in and people are still jumping on this, right? A foreign university recently graduated thousands of people with an online learning degree. So there's a demand for education in Africa, strong demand, right? Cost is there, but we see TNE as a way, as a means where if you're going to spend, say, a cumulative amount of £100,000 to study in the UK, plus tuition and feeding cost and everything, we see if you take a TNE model, that cost probably reduces by 50% or 60%, or even 40 by huge amount of figures. So I would say the opportunities exist there. Cost is one, but you are doing it as a reduced cost, and that's also beneficial for the institution as well. And for our local institutions, in terms of the benefits as well, there are a lot of benefits. The exchanges is also there. You'll be surprised to know that many of our faculty or academics in Nigeria have exposure to foreign degrees, one way or the other, whether conferences, whether papers, whether their masters or whatnot, right? And they can testify that they brought their quality to their own institution as well. So we should see this, and I like what Victor said earlier around the global perspective of this, right? Your student you want your student to be a global citizen. And if you go back to the conversation to say by 2050, Africa will have the largest number of young people. Right? And this Africa will be the talent pipeline for the world. And if your young people are not global in their thinking, then it becomes a problem. So institutions should have an open mind to this thing.
If I start from the point, I think when you closed off your question around how do we make it equitable? Was that what you...
Yeah.
So how do we make it equitable? So we have to look at the stakeholders involved here.
Yeah.
Right. There is the TINE initiator, which is a foreign institution.
Yeah.
There is the possible, in a case of a partnership or a franchise, there is a local institution, right? There are the students, students and parents in one bracket. There is also the government, and the regulator, right? How do we ensure that every stakeholder in this mix comes out with a win-win, with the mindset that they have got something tangible here, and they were not getting the short end of the stick, right? Now, it's not as simple or as straightforward as it sounds. We have seen some TNE arrangements, although the examples I know are not within Africa, where things sort of ended up in a legal dispute, right? We've seen TNE arrangements where the government had to come with some sort of regulation that hampered the activities of the foreign institution. So how do we prevent all this? How do we ensure that there is a sense of, a win from everyone involved?
Yeah.
I think, first of all, Daniel has said a lot of things from the student's perspective, right? And all. When we look at the institution, the foreign institution, I think the basic partner agreements need to be super clear. There needs to be a lot of clarity around what the institution wants to achieve in the country, right? And they need to ensure that if they're working with a partner model, the local partner, the local institution needs to have a clear buy-in into the objective of the foreign institution.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, if you see many of the TNE partnership agreements, I wouldn't say many, but anything that is a sort of partnership agreement between local institutions in Africa and foreign institutions, it is not discussed, but some of the things you would notice is that some of these partnerships agreements are unequal. Yes, where the local institution feels like they are being done a favor. Right.
Sorry to cut you. And you were referring to the one of the previous episodes of TINE Africa podcast, and I really enjoyed that conversation because it was with two institutions in Nigeria. It was from the DVC at Unilag and then the Dean at Pan-Atlantic University. And one of the very profound things, a lot of things were said profoundly on that episode. One of the things that were said was, please don't come thinking you're doing us a favor.
Exactly.
Well,
You
sometimes
understand?
that's usually the body language of the African institution.
And there is a way to actually address this.
So what I think I really want to push to us here is because there is, I don't want to say it in Yoruba or in my dialect, because both of you will probably not understand. But the translation is of that, and my parents say this a lot. Like, if you give a madman a hole, it will make a heap under himself. Do you understand? There is no way we can have this conversation without thinking of it from the lens of whoever is the initiator. They are coming with a lot of knowledge.
Yes.
Do you understand? And I think that where we need to get to is finding that balance between, because if you don't know much about something, you won't know what to ask for. So the problem is not even knowing what to ask for, is actually knowing about that thing enough to know what to ask for. And that's what I really would really like you to speak on.
Yeah. So, if you remember, during my intro, right, I ended with the idea of universities asking what are we bringing to the table, right? Now, when it comes to these partnerships, a lot of the time, because like you said, the body language of the local institutions is showing like, oh, we are being done a favor. And because of that, yes, the foreign institution will also come like the people that are doing someone a favor. Right? Now, I believe it's an anomaly, right? And should be corrected, because the institution coming in, they are not a charity. They have objectives they want to fulfill.
Absolutely.
And you have been identified as a potential partner to help them fulfill those objectives. So I think the onus rests primarily on the local institution to understand that we have something to offer. The question is what? It then requires you to take that effort, the institutions rather, to make that effort, to look inwards, understand their strength. I speak about this like a sermon to most universities. You have something to offer.
Absolutely.
And it is different from one university to another. So university authorities need to take that time to do that internal audit, to understand their areas of strength. And it could be anything. You are a university, you are positioned in a place like Lagos that has a rich marine life. You could push some of this as your comparative areas of advantage in research in marine biology, your location could be an advantage. Your student population is an advantage. The areas, because again, I mean, you have researchers within your institution that have achieved some certain levels of research breakthroughs. It's just that they are not celebrated, they are not popular, right? Get all these areas, do some internal audit, understand your areas of strength, put them together, such that when you go for this kind of these agreements, these discussions, you have something.
You're armed.
Exactly.
But I like to say there are even two types of students, right? There's a student who is very concerned about quality, saying, you know what, I need to go to university that is well ranked, that have these measures in place that ensure that even though they're offering their education in another country, it's still the same quality or as far as the one in their host country. But I've seen some students who say, masters. Right? Whether I do it in a 2-bedroom, whether I do it online, when I do it, I don't care. Masters is masters. And because of that, you now see the demand of institutions, foreign institutions, who they don't really care about the quality. So I say this quality conversation is two ways. It's from the student perspective, from a regulatory perspective, and even the institution. And that's why a lot of conversations is happening right now in TINE. That's why some countries are not even receptive, all right, to TINE in those countries in terms of from accreditation standpoint, because they want to put measures in place to ensure that there's quality. You mentioned employers need to be very, demanding about the quality as well. So I think different stakeholders, like Victor said, needs to come to the table. And universities, even local universities, just to touch on the equitable part as well, I feel local universities need to have the international strategy. Right? International strategy is not just about give me. It's about, like you said, what are my strengths and how can I leverage my strengths to get benefit from the global north, right?
Absolutely.
From that shared mutual goals or shared mutual benefits, So I think that's what it should be.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, like I said at the beginning, there's a lot to unpack in this conversation around TNE, because we could look at it from the student perspective for 1 hour and still be on it. And we can look at it from the government standpoint, regulatory bodies and policy and all of that, and still be on it for 1 hour. One question that I want to ask, and you've started leading into it somehow, is we've talked a lot about the benefits of TNE to the institutions, local and foreign, to the community, to the people. But from my knowledge of, say, maybe engaging with the concept or the theory of neoliberalism, I understand that there is nothing that has positives that doesn't have a negative. In your views or from your experience or from your knowledge, your wealth of knowledge in your both parties, or both, not parties, not political parties, in your both organizations, what are some, maybe you can identify just one or two that you can say maybe it's a negative, and the purpose is not just to highlight it, but also to highlight and to know how to navigate it. So what would you say? Who wants to go first?
Victor mentioned quality. Maybe you should stay on that point.
Victor. So we'll let you go first, and then.
So, if I start with the point of quality dilution, I believe I've spoken to that to an extent. It is a real risk, right? We know that we talk about it in a lot of ways, and in fact, you find that some universities now, right, when you see the actual certificates, right, of the students, you would not differentiate between people that learned through a TINE arrangement and people that learned on campus. Right. So they just have a similar kind. Some are still coming to that point, but many of them. So, however, the quality of education is a real concern, and there needs to be guardrails to ensure that these universities are not just entering into new territories on a transactional basis. Now, that leads to what exactly could those guardrails be? Right. Regulation is number one. Super important. Right. Before we get back to regulation, the other risk, when I think of it, is so when you look at educational curricula and programs, right, that is set up by the regulatory body, right, NUC in our case. In a lot of ways, they are usually in alignment with some national development goals. Right. Now, when in a TNE situation, a foreign institution comes with their own curriculum, the elements of those curricula are not exactly in similar alignment. So you find that they import curricula with different objectives from national development. What I have seen when discussing TNE with some universities, I had some of these conversations in Ghana, in Rwanda, and also in Nigeria, and I have seen something. Some of these universities, especially from the UK now, right, what they do sometimes, as required by local regulation, is to actually, infuse some local elements that ensures that they are not just bringing in curriculum, but they are actually making it adaptable and targeted towards national development. There is a real risk of just getting people to learn and not preparing them as local problem solvers for the local economy. So that's also another risk. And a lot of these risks will be solved, maybe not fully, but at least addressed to a good extent by proper regulation.
Okay.
One other challenge again I see, or one risk, is inequity, right? Especially from a joint degree perspective. Not everybody will still have access to be able to afford that foreign degree or that foreign exposure, and then you have a situation where some are not having that experience or some are having experience. And we saw that earlier on, even in the private versus public university or federal university, or where you say an employer will not want to employ someone from the state because there's this perception of private is better, and we need to be able to manage those conversations as well. There could also be an over-reliance on foreign degree at the expense of national degrees, especially when you begin to see maybe if the cost is a bit more affordable in comparison with the local ones. That could be a risk as well, and you start seeing local universities being afraid of saying, oh, this is my students. Why are you taking my students? Which students it is? And that's why the conversations around mutuality is very important. That TNE not just a transactional thing, and all that. And I like the fact about you mentioned about curriculum. It has to be localized.
And I think that I agree with you. And I also agree that, government agencies and policy makers in country, should also be, once they get very knowledgeable about this thing, and they should be very clear, they should be able to, if they want to try out with a few courses first,
Yes.
it's okay.
Yes.
If they want to try out with a few
Yes.
courses and see how that goes,
Yes.
and make sure that we attain that level of equality, even if it's not completely equal, but equity, I think, is one of the things that we can also strive for. Just ensuring that we're getting, it's win-win, like you said. We're getting good value from it. You're getting good value, because there is no way we can look at TINE that the initiator will not first prioritize, the need for them wanting to come and do it, because they would have invested a lot into coming over, doing a lot of research and all of that. So those they need to get that value, and we also need to know that we must prioritize getting value. And I'm saying we, because African institutions needs to do that. It's okay to try a few courses and to say no on these courses until we've matured in running such programs.
And TINE may not even be for all the courses.
It may not exactly be.
Exactly. Where's the demand? Where are the opportunities?
Exactly.
Just play to
It
that.
may not be, because and again, I think one of the things that I think it's very important, from my as you may know, I have a master's degree in comparative education. Of course, I did that in Nigeria, but and from learning about comparing education systems and processes and programs, I understand that there are some things that are just meant to be just the way they are. Keep it the way it is, because that cultural element, that contextual element in that program or the process that you go through has to be held. Otherwise, you lose that entity, that identity around the program as it relates to your country.
Yes.
I think that the idea of internationalization actually starts from how to be more local, and then to
use your local. Absolutely.
The best internationalization strategies that I've seen are the ones that speaks about the local presence, like how do we work with people? How do we use local languages? How do we work more with the community to achieve the goals that we want to achieve? That it is at that point that you begin to think, how do we present this to the global, partners and all of that? And I think it starts really from that local stamping your feet on your local existence, and then now extending from there.
That's what I mean. Being global doesn't necessarily mean you're then copying international investors.
Exactly.
Instead of looking within, you're looking outside to see what are they doing and how can I adapt. Exactly. He's looking within to say, this is what I have, and this is how I can present it to the world. And have a global. And when I say even make more global, have a global perspective.
Exactly.
To say there's something I have that the world needs to hear. There's something I have that other institutions are looking for. And when you come to partnerships conversations, you're not coming with a cap in the hand to say, give me. You come with a cap, you come to say, this is what I have. This is what I've looked within, I've looked at my strategy. This is how I think I can provide value to you. You know, how you can provide value to myself.
Absolutely. Final question, Victor, and I think this will be short because we've already spoken a lot about this. You spoke earlier about different stakeholders. So how do you think that stakeholders, key stakeholders, and I'll give a few, government, policy drivers, and even colleagues like ourselves who work in international education, what roles can all of these different stakeholders can play in ensuring that TNE is not just a buzzword and is not just an avenue for the initiators to gain, but also for African institutions to benefit and to ensure that the all of this benefit that we talk about is actually made, that it actually happens.
Okay, thank you, Louis. I think this journey starts with heightening awareness. I think we also need to drive education when we interact with the institutions, when we interact with different stakeholders, when we interact with government. We need to keep driving that awareness, driving that education. And here, the education can take different means, right? When foreign institutions are coming in, I think one of the first things they are also trying to understand is who do we work with? Who do we work with? Who is our best? So we're on the ground. We see, we know, we work with. We can actually we can offer advisory and all that. And also from, if I will talk from a THA point as well, if you go to the rankings, I was telling Daniel a couple of minutes ago, we really use like tons of data from each university for the rankings. And so basically the rankings are also a good source to understand university performance in different metrics, especially now that the impact rankings,
as well,
now called the impact ratings.
Ratings. Okay. Interesting.
So but anyways, so basically there are so many ways that we can drive that education, drive that awareness, and of course the future looks bright for TNE in Africa.
Thank you so much for your very perfect submissions, both of you. I love how you respond to my questions and weave a lot of things there, just to let us know that there's a lot to learn. There's still a lot for us to even engage with as we continue to talk about TNE. Again, many of us have not really been in that process of being involved, and we're learning as we go. And but I mean, it's good that we're having this kind of conversations to let us know that there is a lot to learn, there is a lot to unpack, and there are some things that we need to be very aware of as we go into this conversation. Thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you very much, Victor, for being here. I think that this has been, I hope that we can still have some more time to deepen.
Parts of this conversation.
Exactly.
There is still a lot to actually talk about.
There's still a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, as you've heard, that was a very expansive or explosive conversation around transnational education, TNE, as we often and usually say. There is still a lot to unpack. There is still a lot to learn, a lot to actually delve into in this conversation around TNE, especially how it impacts or involves the African context. So, well, thank you. That was the conversation around transnational education and the future of higher education in the continent of Africa. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please like, subscribe, and do comment as well. We'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear your thoughts on what we can improve upon and what you would like to hear as well. So please comment, and also send us an email if you want us to delve into certain conversation. And please remember to subscribe. This has been TINE Africa, the new sound of international education in Africa. My name is Louis Adekola, and I'll see you again. Goodbye.